here at Humanities Montana, and today I'm just going to take an hour of your time, hopefully no more, to talk a little bit about our upcoming grant opportunities, provide a general overview, and if we have time at the very end, answer some questions. So thank you again. The session is being recorded and will be available on our website by the end of this week for a quick and easy reference. And today, I want to talk a little bit about who we are, the grant opportunities that are coming up here in August, and some keys to successful applications, including things we can fund, things we cannot fund, and just a little discussion about some of the humanities pieces involved in our funding projects. Briefly talk about budgets and cost share, 4 quick steps to applying, and then, as I mentioned, if time allows, opportunity for questions. Great. So Humanities Montana is Montana State Humanities Council. We were established in 1972. We're one of 56 councils across the nation created through the state-federal partnership with the National Endowment for the Humanities. And we were designed specifically to infuse humanities directly and effectively into public life. So for over 50 years, we've helped strengthen communities through grants and special programs that reach every corner of the state. We produce, fund, create, and support humanities-based projects and programs that are eye-opening cultural experiences and meaningful conversations. Our goal is to connect people, inspire ideas, and deepen mutual understanding. Our mission is to serve Montana's multicultural communities through stories and conversation. And we offer experiences that nurture imagination and ideas by speaking to Montanans' diverse history, literature, and philosophy. To achieve these things, we offer programs that tell our diverse stories, facilitate conversations about some of the most pressing issues, and we support cultural institutions through grants and partnerships. And we offer humanities such as history, literature, and philosophy to nurture memory, imagination, and ideas. Humanities Montana also embraces the intrinsic value and full humanity of all persons. And we provide programs and experiences that nurture imagination and ideas through those diverse histories, literatures, cultures, and philosophies that are reflective of each of those communities. While attending to racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, ableism, and other systemic inequities, we make a particular commitment to Montana's Indigenous peoples, rural communities, and youth. And we're committed to providing and developing programs and grants for partners using an idea lens to support diverse representation among program leaders, project organizers, scholars, keynote speakers, conversation leaders, and panelists across sponsored events and offerings. So we act as a pass-through entity for funds awarded to us by the National Endowment for the Humanities. And we provide awards to organizations or groups that apply for funding to carry out a specific project that's constituted for nonprofit purposes. Everyone's favorite question is, am I eligible to apply for this funding opportunity? And this is not as straightforward as you might think, but what we are allowed to fund projects supported by nonprofit organizations, institutions of higher education, state, local, and federally recognized Indian tribal governments, institutions of the federal government, groups of persons that form an association to carry out a project. That one gets kind of complicated. So if you think you fall into that category, please call me. And we do not award to individuals, only to organizations, with one exception, and that is for our research fellowship opportunities And applications for research fellowships are only open on December 20th. So those are only offered one time a year, and they're very specific. So we're not going to dive into those today. Although it's not necessary that all of these organizations or groups be incorporated and have a tax exempt status, all applicants must be able to provide what they call a unique entity ID, which is issued by sam.gov. And this is a way for the federal government to identify your organization as being eligible to receive taxpayer dollars, right? So if you have questions about that, I am always here to answer your questions. But if you're an individual, you won't be able to get a unique entity ID. So you'll have to go through your organization. One thing here, I really want to, it's the big question, which is we cannot grant awards to for-profit entities or individuals, as I mentioned, but this is especially important for filmmakers interested in applying, and we'll address this in greater detail in just a moment. This is a lot of text for one slide, but I did want to put it out there so that if you're watching this on YouTube, you can pause it and read through it. This information is also available in our guidelines, and of course, I can provide it to anyone that is interested. So for filmmakers specifically, the NEH has their guidelines say that you have applicant institutions, right? So the organization, the eligible organization that's applying for funds from us has to be substantially involved in your project. And they cannot be an organization that is solely functioning as a fiscal sponsor or agent, in the sense that they are just submitting the proposal, or they're just reporting, or they're just fulfilling contractual obligations. Essentially, we'd like to call media partners, media production partners. So this organization that you're applying to us through has to be involved in your project. And these are the different things that NEH considers acceptable substantive contributions, and not you don't have to do all of these things. Most applicants will not engage in all of these activities, but an applicant that makes at least some substantive contribution to the success of the project, they're not considered like that isolated fiscal sponsorship. If you are a filmmaker and you have interest in applying to us, but you do not have an organization that is eligible to apply, please reach out to me. I have a list of potential media partners where you can apply for fiscal sponsorship with them, but their fiscal sponsorships qualify as substantive involvement. This can get really complicated, but it is something we've had to focus on for this next round of film and video applications. So please, if you have questions, reach out. My final note on this is that the organization that's applying to us for a film and video award, they are considered the awardee. They are subject to all of the regulations and restrictions put upon us as an organization re-granting federal dollars. So it's complicated, and I'm happy to answer questions about this at the end. On a later note, so as a recipient of NEH funding, historically, our annual subaward budget has been somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000, and this year we're really excited that it is $150,000. And we have 3 granting cycles or deadlines and 1 ongoing application throughout this year. So November 1st through October 31st, we have opportunity grants that are open applications, which means that you can apply for them at any time as long as funds are available. And those are up to $1,000. And we have Research fellowships, as I mentioned, and regular grants are due on December 20th. And then regular grants are also accepted on April 20th and August 20th. And then our film and video grants are open until August 20th. So all of the applications are part of a competitive evaluation and will be considered based on the quality of the application, its relevance to the humanities, and the potential outreach and value to all Montana citizens. And priority may be given to requests from entities that are considered marginalized due to community size, economics, and ethnic or cultural diversity. And lastly, all grants are reviewed by staff and board members prior to final award decisions. So for today, we're only focusing our attention on those grants related to that August 20th, 2023 deadline, which are the regular and film and video grant opportunities. You can find the guidelines for each of these grant types on our website. There is an updated version of the film and video guidelines that will be posted before the end of this week with more information about the substantive involvement, which I know you'll all love reading. But these guidelines are truly your best resource and reference for understanding eligibility, understanding the application process, budget guidelines, and general information about our review criteria. It also includes an announcement schedule and information about final reporting. So anything and everything you ever wanted to know about our grant or our grant making or the specific grant you're interested in applying for, it will be in the guidelines. And if all else fails after you read the guidelines, call me. Or call me. Okay, so opportunity grants offer support up to $1,000 for projects in need of more immediate support and involve a less rigorous application and reporting process. Applications can be submitted at any time, as I mentioned, while funds are available, at least 4 weeks prior to the start date of your project. And we do that because it takes us a little while to get everybody to review and process the award. So examples of things we fund through opportunity grants, often it's speaker honoraria, facility rental, outreach for a humanities focused event. Regular grants, on the other hand, offer support in excess of $1,000. The average grant size for a regular grant is about $5,000, but I've seen them up to $10,000 or more. It really depends on the funding and it depends on the project and the need. So applications for regular grants require a little bit more planning, more significant implementation and evaluation, and they're accepted December 20th, April 20th, and August 20th. And again, these are only granted to organizations, not individuals. Some things we funded through regular grants are speaker series and panels, lectures, presentations, cultural festivals, conferences, oral history projects, publications, and so on. And our film and video grants, which are pretty exciting, are intended to provide multi-year support or one-time only support, either or, for major projects in film and video. Major projects are those requiring multiple stages of research and development, production, and post-production, and which generally require a script and a year or more to complete. The film and video grant has funds that are available for projects in 3 stages, and applicants may elect to apply for each stage sequentially or may apply for one-time funding at any of the stages. At the completion of each stage, the applicant must submit evidence of progressive and satisfactory development in order to be considered for one of the next stages. So at stage 1, you can request up to $8,000, and that is in support of research and script development. When you apply for stage 1, you have to submit an example of previous work, or you need to contact us and we can kind of talk through other options, right? If this is your first film, there's other things we can talk through, but you will need to have that conversation before you complete your application. Stage 2 is up to $1,000 for production. This includes principal photography, source material acquisition, and rights clearance, just to name a few. And the expected outcome of stage 2 is a rough cut of the film or video or an equivalent. And you have to have you want to have a completed script or a detailed narrative to apply. Stage 3 is in support of completion of a project, including post-production, and that's up to $10,000. And applicants must submit a rough cut of the project when they apply for stage 3 funding. No one project can receive more than $28,000 in total film and video grants. And as always, all grants are awarded subject to the availability of our funds. We'll go over this a couple times, but all projects funded by Humanities Montana must be rooted in the humanities. They must involve humanities scholars. They must engage the general public. They need to be free or at minimum not cost prohibitive, and they need to be nonpartisan. Okay. More information. So let's dive a little into details about what we do and do not fund. All Humanities Montana projects have to have a clearly defined humanities theme. They must build on sound humanities scholarship. They need to deepen public understanding of a significant humanities question. They should approach projects and subjects analytically, presenting a variety of perspectives. They should involve humanities scholars, academic, professional, or expert, which I'll clarify later, and in all aspects of the project. And we want them to employ appealing and accessible formats that will actively engage the general public in learning and demonstrate the support and involvement of the communities and cultures represented in the project content and activities. Or in your application, specifically address why they were not involved in the project. Maybe you're talking about an ancient civilization and they're no longer here to participate in your program. Those are good things for us to know. Things we cannot fund. So we cannot fund projects that present a one-sided, uncritical treatment of an issue. We can't fund things that focus on a personal instead of a public concern. Any type of project that's promotion of a particular political, religious, or ideological point of view, anything that even borders on political advocacy, or advocating a call to action for either social or political reasons. We cannot support projects that support specific public policies or legislation or lobbying. And we cannot fund things that have content that is obscene, libelous, indecent, or defamatory. This includes like hate speech, personal attacks, or material constituting harassment. And no, we can't fund things that are non-public meetings of organizations. We will consider funding programs open to the public, but held in conjunction with a groups meeting, but nothing that's like closed to the public. And finally, we can't fund anything that falls outside of the humanities. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that might look like, but specific to like social science or natural histories or anything outside of like your traditional English, history, philosophy type thing. It's not that we can't fund that, it's just that your project, if it is coming from one of those other disciplines or that perspective, it has to address humanistic questions or utilize humanistic methods. So it's not that you can't do something on the environment or that you can't do something on mental health. It's that you have to approach that from a humanities perspective. Okay, so before applying, it's really helpful to assess your project in relation to a few other distinctions. One question I get all the time, or one piece of clarification I'm providing frequently, is this distinction between arts and humanities. So the arts and the humanities are not the same thing, which is why Montana is served by both an arts council and a humanities council. So arts programs usually focus on the creation and performance of art, and humanities programs focus on the interpretive aspects of the arts, like discussions about the historical or philosophical context, critical analyses of the methodology, lectures or films that look at characteristics of different art movements or periods. And occasionally we will grant modest amounts for performances when such activities are teamed with interpretations, such as when a play or dance is preceded or followed by a lecture or a scholar-led discussion, or there's some educational component, thinking about things that we fund a lot of youth programs that follow some type of performance, but it's purely for educational purposes. General operating versus program support. So think about what you're asking us to fund. We cannot fund things that fall into that general operating category. Something that might fall into that category would be like construction, restoration, or any type of operating expenses of your existing organization. That might be like building materials or even construction of exhibits. Equipment, property, or other capital purchases are considered general operating. Museum or library acquisitions, like a book collection, or taking on exhibits, that's, except in really unusual circumstances, that's not something we can support. We can, however, support things that are project specific, and you can look at our ineligible versus eligible expenses to really dive into that more. And we can't, like, you want to make sure that all of your expenses are eligible before you apply. And if you have any questions, that's a great time to call me. Some quick ones are, we can't fund things that would raise money for a for-profit organization or entity. Fundraisers are definitely something we look at really carefully. We can't use funds for meals or refreshments for an audience, alcohol expenses or entertainment costs. Definitely not candidates running for political office. There's a fiscal agent and fiscal sponsor fees that gets really murky. So if you are in a situation where that's happening, you need to contact me as soon as possible. And we obviously can't fund anything costs for activities performed by a federal entity or personnel. Again, you can find all of this in the guidelines and quick reference there. Okay, so more into the meat of what we're looking for in projects. And above all else, the State Humanities Councils were formed to create a bridge between humanities in an academic sense and community grassroots initiatives. Essentially, we're applying things like critical thinking, informed reasoning, logic, historical learning and analysis, and creativity to like modern, current, pressing topics and issues and institutions of our world today. So we're looking for projects that respond to current conversations about the conditions of civic and cultural life in real time, or projects that further community-driven ideas and efforts to address issues of social, cultural, or intellectual importance. We're really excited about collaborative projects between humanities and non-humanities organizations that reach larger and more diverse public audiences. We also really want to see projects that engage multiple perspectives when examining humanities themes and ideas, and bringing sustainable, relevant, and historically and culturally informed humanities programs to public awareness. The next piece is scholarship. So in an effort to ensure that projects include well-vetted humanities content, we require all proposals to incorporate meaningful humanities scholarship. I'm often asked, why we require humanities scholars. And the one way to think about this is to consider your potential audience. And knowing that most people might not take the time to fact check the information you're providing them through your project. They might accept or believe the first story they hear. So it's up to both you as the applicant and us as Humanities Montana to ensure that your content is based in fact and provides an unbiased and critical reflection of your humanities theme. We want to help you draw an audience, but the humanities involves more than telling crowd-pleasing stories. So this means we're looking to support projects that use scholarship to inform their program design, planning, content creation, or implementation. And scholarship is not isolated to individuals with terminal degrees in a humanities subject. They don't need to have a PhD in English to be considered your scholar. Our scholarship for public humanities is the engagement of anybody with expertise or significant knowledge that's pertinent to the project's humanities content. So this might be a subject area expert or a community expert. This might be someone who, in your community who's a local historian as a hobby that's developed into all of a sudden they're the only expert on this subject in the community. That person is a scholar. And in your application, you need to describe how your scholarship is informing the facts that you're giving to the audience, and then provides a summary of the person, your humanities scholars, and their qualifications. So whatever that might look like. And it's important because we're a nonpartisan, federally funded organization, we can only provide funding in support of projects that bring in these multiple perspectives and critical treatments to humanities content. And this is really, really crucial if your project involves highly politicized or controversial subjects. The idea is that we really want to see humanities applied to this type of subject matter by bringing in expertise knowledge from multiple angles and starting new conversations based in fact rather than opinion. If you need more information on the different types of scholars that we consider acceptable, that's also on our website under our frequently asked questions. But I think if I forgot any, a subject area expert example might be someone like it could be a business leader or a nonprofit executive or a consultant or a certified professional or a published author, right? It could be anyone that's kind of seen by their peers as an expert in that subject. Again, they don't have to have a PhD to qualify as a scholar. And we require at least one humanities scholar for both regular and film and video applications. The more the merrier, but at least one is the minimum requirement. Also, a tip here, in your application, include the name of scholars that are committed to your project, not scholars you may or may not contact in 6 months. We have often run into issues where many of our board members are actually listed as scholars, but are reviewing grants and have no knowledge that they have been listed in as a scholar on a project. So that can get really tricky. So I would make sure that you're only listing the scholars that are already committed to your project. Okay. So in your proposal narrative, it's important to articulate why your project is important to advancing humanities in Montana. And we want you to also provide evidence that you've done your due diligence to determine that your project is important for your intended audience. We need to understand how your project is responsive to a community need, and you need to share this information in your narrative by describing how the project came to fruition. Think about these questions when you're building this piece of your project, which is, are you addressing a known gap in knowledge or understanding? And how do you know this? How did you find this gap? Why is the project valued by your intended audience? How do you know they're interested in this work? And can your project or your project staff or your organization demonstrate like a long history of working with and or for the target audience or community? Or do you have some in your project leadership or your scholars? Do you have the key knowledge and relationships with the community that you're representing or with an audience you're intending to reach that will help ensure the success of the project? And also definitely share if your project is supported through other beneficial partnerships or collaborations. Are you doing anything unique or innovative in the space of bringing different disciplines or organizations together to have a greater reach? Quality, everybody loves that. So quality, all of our applications are online. They're pretty straightforward. There's lots of instructions in case you're wondering what we mean or how to find more information for each section. But every application requires you to provide a project work plan. And the work plan is a narrative section where you can explain sort of those overarching goals of your project, your intended outcomes or outputs of your activities. Like if we do X, this will happen, right? A plus B equals C. That's it. 1 + 2 = 6. So we also ask that you describe your planned outreach efforts and your evaluation plans. Tell us about how you're going to promote your project and include ways in which you'll recognize Humanities Montana support if granted. We asked for that specifically because we want more people to apply for funding from our organization. We want to see more humanities projects happening across the state. So the more you can help us advertise, the easier it is for us to achieve our mission, which is advancing humanities across the state. But in terms of evaluation, we want you to provide more information than just like we're going to do a post-program survey, right? I want to know how you're going to capture the information and what you're going to do with the information after you capture it, right? Did you have a challenge? How did you meet that challenge? If you were to do this again in the future, what would you do differently? And also include success stories and anecdotal evidence of the experience of your audience. So get creative with your evaluation. And if you have any questions about evaluation, please also give me a call. So project feasibility is another key component to a successful application. Our board of trustees and our staff will be checking to make sure that the overall management of the project is sufficient and sustainable. So who will be involved in your project and what qualifies them to participate? It's also important to include plans for addressing any changes in project personnel. How will you manage the project if someone leaves the organization, right? I always like to say, if I won the lottery tomorrow, how would you all go on without me? Because I will not come into work. You know, help us understand, because that does actually happen a lot, where we lose people, like the person that applies for the grant and is awarded the grant no longer works for that organization, and then we can't find them and we can't find our final report, and it becomes complicated. So giving us some information about how you'd manage something like that would be helpful. We also look closely at your budgets, and we look at, we require a 1-to-1 cost share match. I'll talk about that in a second, but we do need to know that you've put some time into this, that you've read the guidelines, that you've talked to me or someone at the organization, and that you've taken all the steps necessary to create the highest quality proposal that you can. And make sure that if your project's like a one-time thing, make that clear in your application. But if it's part of a larger program or organizational effort, and you want to replicate it in the future, tell us about your plans for sustainability. So let's move on and talk a little bit about tips for successful applications, more specifically. So make sure your application organization information is correct. So as I said, it's all in an online application format. There's some instructions on when you go to log into that page that will prompt you to either log into your organization or log into your account. And if you're not tied to a specific organization, contact me and I can get you set up so you're applying under the right organization. The organization that you use to apply for this grant has to have, as I mentioned, a unique entity ID, and they have to be tied to a tax ID. And they have to be able to supply a Form W-9. This is the organization that will be considered the awardee. They will receive the award, and they will need to be able to cash checks and write checks against the award funds. Okay, so even though our online application requires you to write your narrative in a text field, we still ask that you use the available features to format and organize your proposal. This is all fairly straightforward, but important to say out loud. So this means making sure you're including like indentation and punctuation and bulletin numbering, and that you're using separate paragraphs. You can also include as many reference links as you'd like to complement your narrative where it makes sense to keep things brief. And also know that there are character limits for some of our fields, because that actually will help us speed up the review process. So make sure you're reading those instructions and looking at all of those fields before you start writing your 20-page thesis for our proposal. And successful applications include strong narratives with well-developed and concise descriptions that clearly explain how funds will be used. Make sure your application, you already mentioned that. Share information about your organization's mission, explain the humanities focus of your project, create a good work plan, and again, include outreach and evaluation plans. And the key to success is balance. So try not to over-explain by providing lengthy detail about a specific topic your project addresses, like describing the history of feminism in the United States to ask for funds to support speakers on a panel to talk about feminism in the United States. Like you don't need to give us the whole history, just give us, you know, an overview and then jump into your project specifics. And try not to on the other side, try not to oversimplify by providing like the absolute bare minimum. Tell us what you need, why you need it, what you're going to do with the funds, what you think will happen after your project is completed, and tell us why you think we're the organization that should fund this project. Okay. All applications are reviewed by Humanities Montana staff and board, and initially each application is scored against four major criteria as listed in this image. And you can find a copy of the scoring rubric on our grants resources section of the website. And after applications are scored, our grants committee discusses the highest scoring applications, making funding recommendations to the full board, and then the full board votes on our final award decisions. Everything that I've gone over so far today touches on everything you need and everything that's included in this criteria. So that mission alignment, which is the humanities content, scholarship, the public engagement, and any innovative aspects of your project that you can share with us, those are all things that we'll look for. In terms of significance, we again want to know why your audience wants this information and how you knew that. And if you're talking about a particular culture, how is that culture represented, either as scholars or participants in the content of your project? Quality, we just went over that, and then feasibility, again, that project management and those fun details like budget, cost share, and checking all of the boxes. Sorry, the slide's a little fuzzy, but really budgets can be complicated. Ours are not that complicated to fill out, but you definitely don't want to put things in there that are unallowable expenses. A couple, and this is all in our guidelines, and you can also call me at any time and say, hey, can we use funds towards this? And I can within seconds tell you yes or no, or get back to you very quickly with an answer. One thing I will note, we can use funds towards project staff salaries. It has to be specific to the project. However, no more than 10% of any overall award amount can be used to support executive director salaries. So just word to the wise when you're putting those in there. We can use funds for contractors, consultants, scholars. That might be panel participation, public presentations, research, any type of expert services to improve the quality of the project content. We can cover travel per diem, such as lodging, meals, and mileage for project staff, contractors, consultants, scholars. Know that if you are submitting a request for funds for travel or per diem, you want to make sure that you track those receipts and can back them up on your final report. Pretty straightforward, but just make sure if you're using it that you're keeping your receipts. And project activities that directly support that project design, this could be like promotion or publication expenses, so printing costs, advertising costs. You can rent facilities and equipment with our funds. You obviously can't purchase equipment or facilities with our funds, but you can rent. And we'll start there. And there's a whole host of things we can't fund. And I kind of went through some of those earlier. But one last note is there's that difference between direct and indirect expenses. So direct expenses are those things that are specific to your project. Anything that's not directly accountable to your proposed project activities falls into this sort of potentially unallowable space. So if you have questions about those, please again let me know. It is in your guidelines. It is, I think, part of the application itself. So and I am also always happy to review your budget before you submit it, and we can talk about it. I would ask that you have your proposed budget to me for review before the end of July. After July, it just gets too busy. So giving me a call, emailing me, sharing the budget with me so that I can kind of guide you before you submit something that wouldn't even be considered, I think is really helpful. So successful budgets are clearly depict the exact funds that you need to support the specific activities in your narrative. Right? If you say you're going to use funds to pay speakers and honoraria, and you want to have your budget reflect that. And remember that the line items and amounts that you propose are the same that we will ask you to report on. And any modifications to a budget, if you're awarded funds, you'll have to get from us in writing. So don't get creative with your accounting at the beginning or at the end of your projects. Just call us. We don't bite. We want to help you. We want to see you use the funds. So please just reach out if you have any questions. Couple final items here. Cost share. And sorry for the blurry slide. Both regular, I'll lead with, we do not require cost share for opportunity grants. So sorry about that. But both regular and film and video budgets require a one-to-one cost share match. So this is a pretty simple, super simple example. If you're pretend you're facilitating a discussion panel at your local library and your organization needs funding to help one of your panelists travel from somewhere else in Montana. So Humanities Montana gives you $100, or you're requesting $100 from Humanities Montana. And the in-kind cost share, let's say you're the speaker that is traveling for this panel discussion, they say, you know what, I'm not going to charge you for my actual time. So I'm going to donate an hour of my time to present, and I typically charge $50 an hour. So that in-kind donation is $50. For cost share, which would be your cash, right? Your organization pays $50 to promote via social media this panel discussion. And that you're contributing to the project $50. So the cost share in kind and cash is $100, which is the match for our awarded funds of $100. So your total project budget in this imaginary scenario is $200. Also note, if you do have a larger project budget, you cannot use other federally sourced funds as your cost share. So if you're coming from a university and your university is funded in any way, shape, or form through the federal government, and some of those funds, like it's not salary, this is a couple different categories, but if you have another federally sourced income, you can't list that as cost share at all. You can't match federal dollars with federal dollars. I think that's the way to say it. Money you get from us is federally sourced, and you can't use other federally sourced funds to match ours. That can get confusing, so please, again, call me with questions. Okay, so what's next? The best projects are those with the most well-formulated plans. So the best thing to do is to prepare by reading. You can read the grant guidelines, but you can, I would say, start with our grant resources on the website. There's an eligibility survey. It's quick and dirty. It's just an answer for you. It doesn't come to me. It's just so that if you have questions, if you're not sure if you're eligible, you can try this, and then call me with questions. These informational webinars are recorded and posted on the website, so you can rewatch this if you're really a glutton for punishment, or you can reference something from an earlier grant cycle. Our grant FAQs have everything I just shared with you and more. They are the frequently asked questions. There's some great content there for quick reference. And there are links to forms and other things like the scoring rubric under grant forms and links. The next thing I would recommend after reading through some of those, watching this webinar, reading through the grant guidelines, call me, and my number's on the screen. And I can help you. You can pitch your idea to me. We can talk about it. I can point you in the direction of next steps. But calling me is really important. And the final step is applying online. So you can apply online, or you can create your account and you can see the application questions. And I forgot to mention that the application questions for both regular grants and film and video grants will, if they're not already on the website, they will be today. So you can preview the question list before you even hop into the online application portal. So those are there, you'll be able to see them, and it's pretty comprehensive. It lists everything. Even if I say, what county are you from, it lists like all 56 counties. So everything you need to know is there. Okay, so our success your success is our success, right? We want you to be successful because we want you to help us promote and advance humanities program across the state. That's what we want. So we want to help you. We want you to succeed, want to fund projects. All details and jargon aside, we want to help you succeed. So please reach out to us. Check out our website, whatever you need to do, and we'll help you get there. If you need examples of other film projects, please reach out. I'm happy to share some of those with you. I also have additional resources. So I have a direct line of support now to NEH. And they also have great funding opportunities. They also have a webinar, and they can fund at much higher amounts, especially for film and video and media projects. So if you want more information about that, please reach out and I will help you get there. So, okay. I'm going to open it up just for a few minutes for questions. Yeah, if anybody would like, if anyone has questions, I think you can unmute yourself.
Hey, Megan, I have a question on the film and videos. Is there a specific distribution requirement for film and videos? Does it have to be available on YouTube or on certain media? Is there?
Not necessarily. Projects like film projects that have sort of they have a distribution plan are obviously more competitive than those that do not. However, my understanding with film and video is that you kind of have to build it before you can ask for anybody to air it, right? Unless it's being created by an affiliate, right? Like unless it's being commissioned by like PBS or the History Channel or something like that. Unless they're funding the whole thing, you're gonna have to create it and then go out and look for people to distribute it to. But it's important if you're, especially if you're a filmmaker who's had success in the past, tell us about your contacts, tell us about where you're, where you've previously distributed your content. And that will help us, because knowing that you have connections or knowing that you have a plan that will make you more competitive. But there is nothing that says like, you have to go through these channels or you have to have a relationship up to this point, especially because if we fund a development project, you're just in the research stage, right? So you're not going to know where the heck your project's going to go. So. Any other questions? I think I have a. So yeah, just again to regular grant, those interested in regular grant opportunities, the application questions are online. You can log into the online grant management portal and preview the questions. You can even create a draft that then you can ask me to review. Again, you have to have that request to me before the end of July. But everything you need to know is there, it's open, you can see it, you can start digging around. The same exact scenario for film and video. Film and video, though, with the fiscal sponsorship issue and the substantive involvement, it can get a lot more complicated. So please call me with your project idea before starting anything, because that's going to be your first step, is becoming eligible. So.
Yeah, I get one other question, and that had to do with, we don't, humanities doesn't fund something that's an uncritical treatment of an issue. So I'll give you a specific example. There's someone we're working on a video about the Chinese experience in Montana, and they very much focus on the Chinese as active historical actors. They're not looking at victimization stories. They're also not looking at parts of the Chinese experience that perhaps the gangs involvement, the Chinese Tong's involvement in bringing immigrants. It's just sort of very much about their contribution. Is that considered uncritical in that context?
No, because you're providing a historical account Right, but I think the key to something like that is bringing in the right people to inform the content, right? That's where that scholarship comes into play. Are these, like, where are you getting your information? That's pretty much what we want to know. And if you have scholarship that backs, you kind of respond like, well, some people do think this way about this content, right? You can say that in your application. To address that, we're including this part, like we're including information about this. But that way it doesn't take away from like your content being focused on the Chinese experience in Montana. That just is what it that is what it is. But
Right.
making sure you tell us in your application, like, we're aware that this might there may be another way to look at this, and we're basing it on these facts, and this is where we're getting that information. Does that help? That comes into play even more so when it's like that highly politicized or controversial topic. If you're doing a public program, right, not so much film, but like a public program where you're presenting ideas, you need to have people from both sides there, or you at least to have both sides represented in the conversation or acknowledged, especially in that debate scenario, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah, this is not so much debate, it's just it's material coming from Chinese documents that have never seen the light of day. And so it's sort of it's new, it's discovery more than it's debate.
Yeah, and it's discovery, it's fact, it's based in fact. You can't really argue with a document written by the person you're talking about.
Right.
If you're, as a filmmaker, if you've done your research and you know this information is true and it comes from a reputable source, then you're just providing facts. So there's a note on my door that says facts matter. And I really think that's what we're always looking for, right? Give us the facts because they matter when you're telling a story.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Thanks, Clark, for the great questions. Thank you to everyone who was here today, and for all of those of you who may be watching this after the fact. My contact information is on the screen. If you need anything at all, please email or call, and I will do my best to get back to you as quickly as possible. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.